children were shot by wounded in the left arm and was able to drive the children to the hospital.
Steve was shot first. 3-year-old Danny was shot in the back. 7-year-old Cheryl was shot twice from behind and died on the way to the hospital.
Elizabeth Diane Downs was born on August 7th of 1975. Not much is known of her early childhood, but her own testimony indicated that her father began sexually abusing her at the age of 12. What we do know is that Downs graduated high school, a place where she would meet her eventual husband, one Steve Downs. After high school, Downs would enroll in a Bible college, but her tenure at the university wouldn't last long, being expelled after only 1 year of study due to a charge of promiscuous behavior. She would then be forced to return home and once again begin living with her parents. This arrangement would not last, and Downs would leave home and marry her high school sweetheart Steve Downs in 1973. A year later, the couple would welcome their first child, Christine Ann, in 74. She would follow that up in 76, giving birth to another daughter, Cheryl Lynn, and finally a baby boy, Stephen Daniel, in 79. It's at this point that the family seemed to have settled into a fairly normal, fairly mundane life. But all that would change about a year after her son's birth. In 1980, her husband Steve would file for divorce when he began to suspect that his son, Stephen Daniel, was not his and was instead conceived from an extramarital affair. Even after the divorce, Downs would continue her life, even acting as a surrogate mother to another couple. She even took part in an interview for the Washington Post regarding being a surrogate mother, saying, "People have wondered why I won't regret this, giving up the baby. And that's very easy to answer. When you kill a child, when you have an abortion, you've terminated something." Downs herself had an abortion at some point in her life. You've murdered someone. It's cruel. It's horrible. It's terrible. But when you do something out of love, when you carry a child for somebody else and turn that life over to them, you haven't done anything bad, and it's nothing you look back on and regret. It's good. Her words may have resonated with other women at the time, but Downs would fail to live up to them herself, eventually taking the life of her own flesh and blood. You see, on May 9th of 1983, Downs would take her 3 children, load them all into her car, and head out for what was seemingly a normal drive. But this was anything but normal, as Downs would take a .22 caliber handgun that she owned and proceeded to shoot all of her children and then wound herself. Downs would then slowly, some reports indicate her moving lazily at speeds of under 10 miles an hour, drive them to the local hospital. Upon making it and being admitted, her daughter Cheryl, age 7, was declared dead. Stephen, age 3 at the time, was paralyzed from the chest down, and Christy, age 8, suffered a stroke from her injuries. Downs herself also suffered a gunshot wound to the forearm. Downs stated to the attending personnel that the family were the victims of an attempted carjacking, and that during a struggle, a strange, shaggy-haired man shot her and her children. But staff quickly noted that things seemed off because Downs was acting far too calm for someone who was attacked and had all 3 children shot, one of which was already pronounced dead. John Mackey, the doctor in charge the evening of the murder, would later state during the trial that, "What I observed was a woman who was very calm, very self-assured, not tearful, not angry, occasionally smiling, occasionally chuckling." He later testified, "I saw a woman who appeared to be in very good control of herself." Things would quickly spiral out of control, as police would later note that Downs made a number of statements that both police and hospital staff found inappropriate. This led police to target Downs, as their suspicions only increased after Downs visited her children in the hospital and proceeded to call one Robert Knickerbocker, a married man with whom she worked with and had been having an affair. A forensic investigation of the car found that the evidence did not in any way match the story Downs had provided to hospital staff and police. They found no blood splatter or gunpowder residue on the driver's side of the vehicle, where the attacker would have been during said carjacking. On top of this, Knickerbocker would tell police that Downs had stalked him and suggested that she would be happy to kill his wife if it meant the pair could be together. He, along with Downs' ex-husband, told police that Downs in fact owned a .22 caliber handgun, something Downs herself failed to disclose. The final piece of evidence to charge Downs came after investigators found unfired casings in her home that matched those used in the attack. But what eventually sealed her fate was eyewitness reports from several people who saw Downs driving very slowly as she headed to the hospital in her blood-soaked car. Downs was eventually arrested on February 28th of 1984, some 9 months after the shooting. She was then charged with murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. During her trial, the prosecution would lean on 2 points: that Downs tried to kill her children so that she could be free of them and return to Knickerbocker, as she claimed that he did not want children in his life, pointing to an unmailed letter which Downs had written Knickerbocker saying, "You know, I don't want a daddy for my kids," and that you would never be left alone with them. The second point the prosecution leaned on, and one that in hindsight holds very problematic views, used her surrogacy against her. The prosecution would imply that only a callous woman would give up their own child for money. But most interesting of all was the revelation that Downs was once again pregnant, the due date possibly interfering with the trial itself. Downs would say that, "I'm afraid of going into labor before the trial is over." Apparently, Downs had lost everyone around her after her arrest, and she connected with someone who told her that she was young, single, and attractive. After her pregnancy was revealed, Downs stated that the man in question shunned her. The child, a girl, was taken in by the state of Oregon and later adopted to a family. The trial was a spectacle, the likes of which the local area had never seen before. Opinions changed sharply, as the outpouring of support for Downs was immense early on, but changed quickly after her arrest and the beginning of the trial. And even as a pregnant Downs sat on trial for the murder of one child and the attempted murder of 2 others, the breaking point for many of the jury came when her surviving daughter, Christy, now suffering from a speech impediment from the gunshot causing a stroke, started taking the stand and describing her mother shooting everyone in the car. After this, Downs would eventually be convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 50 years. She still retained the possibility of parole, serving a minimum of 25 years, but the judge stated that he intended that she never be free again. Psychiatrists would later diagnose her with severe personality disorders and label her a deviant sociopath. But that isn't the end of this story, or of Downs making headlines, as she did in 1987. While serving her sentence at the Oregon Women's Correctional Center in Salem, Downs managed to escape her cell and scale a 15-foot razor wire fence, protecting herself by stuffing clothes into her prison uniform. Downs would then go on the run for 10 days, during which a 14-state manhunt would erupt. She went to the home of one Wayne Seifer, whose wife was serving a sentence at the prison, which was only a few blocks away. She had shown up unannounced and did not identify herself. Seifer thought nothing of it, as he was a major drug addict and essentially lived in a drug house with a number of people. The pair would enter into a sexual relationship during her time hiding there. Police were searching multiple states for Downs, never realizing that she was only mere blocks away from the prison. It wouldn't be until a detective searched Downs' belongings that something came up. They found a map of Mexico and some stationery. But upon looking closer at the blank paper and tilting it just a certain way under the light, indentations of writing could be seen. The FBI came in and then created a copy, and upon enhancement, located a line going from top to bottom, which they concluded was the street the prison was on. On the bottom left of the page was a small box where the prison was, and at the top was another marking and the address of Seifer's home. Upwards of 40 police officers raided the home, but Seifer wasn't there. He was on vacation with family at the time. But Downs was captured in Seifer's bedroom, but attempted to reach for a gun, which happened to be a BB gun, but stopped before reaching it after an officer told her not to go for it. The officer later saying she was going to grab a BB gun and just go suicide by cop, but I said, "Don't do that," and she put the BB gun down, and she went without a fight, turned her hands over, and put her hands behind her back. Downs would receive an additional 5 years for the escape. Seifer received 5 years of probation for housing her during the escape, and ever since then things have been fairly quiet. Downs would be considered for parole starting in 2008, and when it came up, she reaffirmed her innocence, sticking with her story of the man shooting her and her children, as she has maintained over the years.
Do you still maintain that you did not commit these murders? Or the murder and the other crimes you were convicted of?
Absolutely. I didn't commit them, and I still maintain my innocence.
While this is the case, she often has changed the story of who shot the family from being a shaggy-haired man to 2 men in ski masks, then drug dealers, and even corrupt police officers. Her parole has been denied. Downs is scheduled for another parole hearing sometime in 2022. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Case Files. If you liked what you saw and heard, the best thing you can do is like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to share this video with your friends and family. Until we meet again, stay safe and never stop learning.